one where we break down complex legal concepts into a clear conversation, exploring the rules, rights, and realities that shape our everyday lives. And today I have my special guest. For sure, he's a lawyer, and one of his advocacy knowledge plus experience, and of course, equal success, none other than Mr. Saul Bienenfeld.
Hi, Daniel. Such a pleasure to be here again and see you again. Oh, I had such a
Again.
great time last time, so I'm so happy that you invited me back on your show.
Yes, I hope this will be a weekly, Mr. Saul. And for sure, our listeners will be empowered to our each topic that we are talking about. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's
Yeah.
talk about criminal defense in the age of AI, surveillance, and social stigma. So tell us what is all about.
Wow, it's such an interesting topic, and I'm so glad I'm able to come on your podcast and speak about it. So, let's start with the basics. Something called predictive policing. It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but it's already here, and it's being used in police departments across the country. Predictive policing uses algorithms to analyze data from past crimes and predict where future crimes might occur. By looking at patterns like time of day, location, types of offenses, AI tools can forecast hotspots, areas where crime is more likely to happen. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a great tool. We're talking about making law enforcement more efficient and potentially preventing crimes before they happen. But what happens when the algorithm gets it wrong? And of course, it could be a biased algorithm. And that's where I would come in as a criminal defense attorney to explain that, they got it wrong and, my client really is innocent. One of the biggest concerns with predictive policing is the bias. Most AI systems learn from historical data. But here's the problem: if that data is biased, the AI will be too. And in practice, this means that certain neighborhoods, particularly low income communities of color, could be over policed, while others might get overlooked. You can take an example: the compass system. They're used in courts to assess a defendant's risk of reoffending. Now, some studies have shown that this system is more likely to flag black defendants as higher risk, even when they haven't even reoffended. So, how do we trust these systems when they're built on inherently flawed data? And that's the problem we have. And that's what predictive policing and AI is all about.
Interesting, Mr. Saul. And explain how AI tools are being used to identify likely offenders in high crime areas.
Right? Like I said, it's a predictive policing. It's used to determine areas of hotspots. It's used to determine of the times of day. And they're putting more police force in this one area where it really sometimes is wrong because the data is wrong. And it's not just the police using these AI tools; the courts are getting involved too. AI tools are being used to help judges determine sentences. These tools use algorithms to analyze a defendant's criminal history, a risk of reoffending, and other factors to suggest what sentence a judge should give a defendant. On paper, this sounds like it could make the sentencing process more objective. But imagine you're the defendant who's had a minor run with the law in the past that's going through sentencing recommendation. And does that seem fair? The reality is there's no human empathy or nuance in these systems. The software just crunches numbers but doesn't account for the complexities of human behavior. It's just not fair.
Truly unfair, people. From the street to your smartphone, public surveillance camera, drones, and license plate readers. Can you tell us about those? A new
Oh,
innovation.
definitely. Oh, so this is so interesting because We have all these surveillance systems. You walk down the street, there's CCTV cameras, there's drones, there's smartphones, there's ring doorbells, there's blink doorbells, and we're being watched, and it's only growing. But the question is, are we safer, or have we crossed the line into a surveillance state? You know, and we really have to look into it, and how law enforcement uses this technology, and the risks of mass surveillance, and how defense attorneys like myself are fighting back to protect the client's rights. um, again, we'll begin with the basics of the public surveillance. In today's world, public spaces are filled with cameras. You can't walk down the street without seeing some form of surveillance, whether it's a traffic camera, a private security camera, or a facial recognition system. And many systems across the world have adopted citywide CCTV networks to monitor public areas, often in the name of safety. Now these systems are touted as a way to deter crime, to investigate incidents more efficiently, and to ensure public security. But the problem is that as the number of these cameras grow, so does the risk of misuse. And the question we need to ask is, who's watching the watchers? There's something called license plate readers. A license plate reader, or an LPR, have become a mainstay in policing. These systems can automatically scan the license plate of a car driving on a street while it's moving, track them in real time, and they're often used to locate stolen vehicles or track down suspects in a criminal investigation. But here's the catch: license plate readers also capture the movement of everyday citizens who may have no connection to any crime. So you're just driving to the bank and they're going to know it. You're just driving to grandma's house. They're going to know it. You're driving to work, driving to the gym, and the police are going to know about it. And then there are drones. And yes, drones. Law enforcement agencies are, in some parts of this country, are using drones to monitor the public spaces. You know, they track suspects. They even gather intelligence on crowds at protests. They use facial recognition to find out who's in the crowd. And while drones offer an aerial view that traditionally surveillance cannot, they also raise concerns about privacy and how easily they can be used to gather data on people without their knowledge. And in terms of facial recognition, this is one of the most controversial forms of surveillance in surveillance technology. You've probably seen it in action already, right? So there's many
Yes.
airports. When you get onto an airplane, they now look at your face rather than look at your ID. Shopping malls use facial recognition to identify people. Casinos, I think, were the first ones to use it to see who's playing in their casinos, if they've ever been trespassed before, if they're supposed to be there, if they're not supposed to be there. But it's used by law enforcement to track suspects in real time. Again, at first glance, it seems like a great tool. You've got a suspect on a security camera, and facial recognition can now match their face to a database of known criminals. But here's where things get tricky: the technology is far from perfect. Studies have shown that facial recognition software has higher error rates for people of color, for women, for younger individuals. Imagine being wrongly identified by a facial recognition system and arrested for a crime you didn't commit. Unfortunately, this happens more often than we'd like to admit.
Mr. Saul, let's talk
Yep.
about the court of public opinion, stigma in the digital age, social media, and cancel culture. What it's all about.
Wow. You know, um, that's a major topic these days in terms of the social media, and the age of artificial intelligence, surveillance, and it's a big problem, and we have to really look into it, because everyone seems to have a TikTok page, a Facebook page, a social media page, and people are looking at it. And social media affects criminal investigations. It affects jury pools and reputations of the accused. And what defense attorneys can do to fight about this, we have to discuss it. So let's look into this. Social media has become an essential part of daily life for millions, maybe even perhaps billions of people. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, it gives us instant access to global events and discussions. But here's the problem for criminal defense attorneys: The public often forms opinions about a case long before it ever reaches the courtroom. Now, in today's world, a single post or tweet can define a person's reputation. It can be used as evidence in an investigation, or worse, it can create a public perception that's impossible for me to undo. For example, let's say a celebrity or a public figure is arrested. Their mugshot goes viral on Instagram, and within
Yeah.
minutes, they're labeled guilty in the court of public opinion because there's a mugshot out there. Even if the case is ultimately dismissed, that reputation damage is irreversible. And for someone who isn't
Irreversible.
famous but is facing serious charges, social media can be even more devastating. One of the most dangerous aspects of social media in criminal cases is its influence on jury pools. Now, we've all heard about something called trial by media. With social media, this concept is a reality. The moment a criminal case hits the headlines, people start forming opinions, often based on biased or incomplete information. This is where things get really tricky for us as defense attorneys. If a potential juror has seen the social media posts or read the news articles about a case before coming into the courtroom, their ability to be impartial could be compromised. They may already have decided this defendant's guilt or innocence way before hearing any actual evidence. And as a defense attorney, it's our job to ensure that our clients get a fair trial. This means challenging jurors who have been influenced by media coverage, and sometimes even asking for a change of venue to ensure a fair and unbiased jury. Social media is being used as evidence also in criminal cases. Investigators and prosecutors are looking at defendants' social media profiles all the time to find more evidence, whether it's photos or posts or comments or even a geolocation where you've been. That could be that all that stuff could be used to support their case and it could be used against clients. This evidence might seem solid on the surface. A post on Facebook or Instagram where a defendant brags about committing a crime, for example, could look very damaging. But social media evidence is rarely as clear cut as it seems. Photos can be taken out of context. Posts can be misconstrued or worse, fabricated, especially with AI. And in my practice, I've seen cases where social media posts were twisted to make it look like the defendant was involved in criminal activity, even when they weren't. It was a totally innocent post. And as defense attorneys, it's crucial for us to thoroughly examine social media evidence. We can challenge its authenticity, its context, its relevance, and if the evidence was obtained improperly or violates our client's privacy, we can fight to have it excluded from the trial.
Mr. Saul, explain how AI tools are being used to identify likely offenders in high crime areas.
So, this is done by what I call forensic policing. This is all the data from past crimes are put into a computer, it's analyzed, and the computer actually tells the police where to look for crime. It's happening. It's back in the future. The computer is now telling the police where to look for crime, but it's not always accurate because the data that's put into it isn't always accurate. The data is put in by a person. People make mistakes. So we have a big problem with this, and it continues to prove itself wrong every once in a while. And what happens is there's a tremendous police presence in one area, usually a low income area, and the higher income area doesn't have enough police to patrol it, and they need police also to patrol their areas. So it's not the greatest tool to be used, and yet it's being used all the time.
Discuss the bias baked into a data sets and how defense attorneys challenge these algorithms in court. Mr. Saul.
Great question. The way to challenge an algorithm like this is to find out what data was put into the algorithm to start with, and then to disprove to that data, to say that the data was incorrect. So garbage in, garbage out. That's what we like to say. If I put the wrong data in, even by smallest amount, the smallest percentage, whatever comes out of that computer is going to be wrong. So I need to put into the algorithm decide determine whether that data was correct. And that it's
So let's talk about the fight of facial recognition and error rates. Success stories versus wrongful arrest due to misidentification. Can you tell us about this?
So yeah, it happens. The facial recognition is not a perfect tool, and like I said before, it does make mistakes with people of color. It does make mistakes with women. And it makes mistakes with younger people. Um, so we have to again determine if the facial recognition is actually correct or not correct. Because if it's not correct, then the person is innocent because it's facial recognition who's following this person, or it's facial recognition determining that this is the same person that is on the surveillance camera in the bank who robbed the bank. So I've had cases where my the picture of the person in the bank and the actual client did not look the same, yet the computer said these are the same people. And I had to go to court and I had to show the both pictures to the jury and say this is not the same person. And the way I was able to do it had to do with the it's called a cowlick, where your hair is placed, where your hairline starts. And if you put one picture on top of the other, you would see that the hairline of the picture from the bank was very different than the hairline of my client. And I was able to get my client acquitted because of a hairline. And that was very interesting, even though facial recognition said it's the same person, and it wasn't.
Race constitutional issue, Fourth Amendment, and due process concern. Can you tell us about this, Mr. Saul?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of constitutional issues, even in terms of social media and in terms of like how they got my information, when they got my information, did they violate my Fourth Amendment rights against search and seizure? Um, was the government allowed to follow me? Um, one of the best examples is a GPS tracker. Sometimes the police will take a GPS tracker and put it on the suspect's car or put it in the suspect's luggage or bag because they want to see where the bag's going to go and they want to see where the car is going to go. If they don't have a warrant to do that, that evidence is going to get thrown out. And whatever was the fruit of the poisonous tree, whatever evidence came out because they followed a car or because they put a tracker into a piece of luggage, that evidence needs to be thrown out also. And the Fourth Amendment is a very serious constitutional protection that people have. And it's very simple to get a warrant. You go to a judge, you swear out an affidavit, and hopefully the judge will sign the warrant if you're the police officer. Hopefully they don't if you're the criminal. But if usually they sign the warrant. And if they miss that step, your Fourth Amendment right is being violated, and you're entitled to have that evidence thrown out. And anything was as a result of that evidence needs to be thrown out also. And that's where, although AI is wonderful and surveillance is wonderful and social media is wonderful, but if it's not done legally, the evidence gets thrown out. Bottom line.
Mr. Saul, let's talk about a case example. A defendant flagged by AI surveillance and how the defense dismantled the reliability of the tech.
A gentleman about 62 years old is accused of a bank robbery. It's accused of an ATM robbery, actually, that he walked over to somebody at an ATM machine when they were taking out their money. He put a gun to their side and said, "Give me the money," and walked away with the money. ATMs have cameras. The camera came up with a picture of what the person looked like who was the bank robber. My client gets arrested 3 weeks later, and AI facial recognition tells the detective it's the same person. I'm looking at these pictures. Maybe it's the same person. Maybe it's not the same person. I just don't understand it. My client is adamant that it's not him. And the picture does look a little bit like him, but he's adamant it's not him. So I bring the picture to another expert in AI and in facial recognition as well. And that expert tells me it's not the same person because the hairline is different. And what facial recognition does is it actually measures the distance between parts of your body. So in other words, between your ears and your nose, between your eyes, between your chin and your nose. It measures all these things and it figures out from the measurements that it's an exact match. But the hairline was very different on this person. And he didn't go to a barber and he didn't shave, and hairlines can't be changed so easily. And I was able to use that evidence and that expert to convince a jury that it wasn't the person who robbed the bank, that it was somebody totally different, and he got acquitted.
Interesting case, Mr. Saul. But before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Soul, what would be your piece of advice for those people out there? Well, it's been having difficulties for the law to saying that I'm innocent of all this tech.
At the end of the day, our job as defense attorneys is to protect our clients, not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion also. So social media can't be ignored, and neither can its potential to shape the outcomes of a case. So it's my job to level the playing field, make sure that my clients get a fair trial, regardless of the noise around them. So anyone who needs a listening ear could always give me a call, send me an email. I'm available to you. You could find me on Instagram at Bienenfeld Law. You can find me at my website, which is now posted, bienenfeldlaw.com. And call me. I will be happy to discuss the case with you and find out, if we could help or not. I'm always available. Thanks. Great seeing you, Daniel. Great podcast.
Yes.
Keep up the fantastic work.
Yes, indeed. I hope we can do this every week, Mr. Saul, if you have time, because let's empower people all over the world through your knowledge, because I believe ignorance of the law excuse no one. So, people, another great episode, and catch you next week with Mr. Saul. I hope so. Mr. Saul, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.